There's a hero standing at the gates of Mount Olympus, but he's not trying to get in. He's trying to keep you out. Prometheus, the Titan who gave humanity fire, who endured millennia of torture for his love of mortals, who was once the gods' greatest ally, now commands armies against Olympus itself. He fights for Chronos, the tyrant who conquered the underworld. He burns with blue flame and speaks in riddles about change and destiny. And here's what makes no sense. He can see the future. He knows he's going to lose. So why is he fighting? That's the question that haunts every encounter with him in Hades 2. The Firebringer who once stole from the gods to save humanity now stands ready to destroy them. And when you finally learn the truth, when you understand what he's really doing and why, everything you thought you knew about heroes and villains, about justice and sacrifice, will turn to ash in your hands. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand why Prometheus betrayed Olympus, we need to go back. Back before the war. Back before the betrayal. Back to the moment when an eagle descended from the sky and a titan began to scream. Close your eyes. Breathe. And let's descend into a story of fire, chains, and a gambit so audacious that only a being who can see the future would dare attempt it. Part 1. The chains that bind picture. If you will, a lonely peak. The wind howls across barren stone, carrying with it the scent of salt from distant seas and the faint, acrid smell of sulfur from volcanic vents far below. The sun beats down mercilessly during the day, and at night the cold seeps into bones even of the immortal. In classical mythology, this was Mount Caucasus, a remote peak at the edge of the known world. But Hades 2 reimagines this punishment, suggesting through environmental storytelling and NPC dialogue that Prometheus may have suffered his torment somewhere connected to Mount Olympus itself, perhaps within sight of the very palace he once helped the gods win. The game leaves this deliberately ambiguous, but the implication is chilling. Zeus wanted Prometheus's screams to echo through the halls of Olympus, a constant reminder of what befell those who defied the king of the gods. Wherever it was there, bound by chains forged from adamantine, hangs the form of Prometheus. His wrists bleed where the metal cuts into immortal flesh, wounds that heal and open again in an eternal cycle. His body is powerful, muscular, testament to his Titan heritage, but it is marred by a single terrible mark that runs diagonally across his torso from left shoulder to right hip. This is not the wound of battle, not the honorable scar of a warrior. This is something far worse. Every day, as the sun reaches its zenith and the heat becomes almost unbearable even for one who cannot die, the eagle comes. In the mythology, this creature was spawned from the most terrible monsters. Some say from Typhon and Echidna. Others claim it was forged by Hephaestus himself and given life by Zeus as a personal instrument of torment. But in the world of Hades 2, this eagle has a name: Atos. And Atos is no mere instrument anymore. It has become something more complicated, something that speaks to the strange and twisted bonds that form in cycles of suffering. The eagle descends with wings that span wider than a mortal's height, talons sharp enough to pierce divine flesh as easily as a knife through water. And Prometheus, who can see the future, who possesses foresight beyond all others, watches it come. He sees it before it arrives. He feels the pain before the talons strike. His gift, which might seem like a blessing to those who do not understand, becomes a curse in moments like these. He experiences his torment 3 times over, once in the vision of what will be, once in the terrible present moment, and once in the memory that will haunt him until the next day brings it all again. The eagle, Atos, lands on his chest with the weight of divine judgment itself. Its eyes meet his, and in that moment there is something almost apologetic in the creature's gaze, though perhaps that is only imagination, only the desperate need to find meaning in senseless cruelty. The talons dig in. The beak strikes true. And Prometheus screams. The liver, the ancient Greeks believed, was the seat of human emotion, the place where feelings dwelled and multiplied. Perhaps Zeus chose this organ deliberately, perhaps not. But the symbolism is not lost on Prometheus, as the eagle tears into his very capacity to feel, devouring his emotional core piece by agonizing piece. The pain is beyond description, beyond language, beyond anything a mortal could comprehend and continue to exist. But Prometheus is no mortal. He is Titan-born, and he will not be granted the mercy of death or unconsciousness. He must feel every moment, must remain awake and aware as his liver is consumed. And then night falls. The eagle, sated, departs. The chains remain. And slowly, inexorably, Prometheus's body begins to heal. The liver regenerates, growing back cell by cell, nerve by nerve, until by dawn it is whole again. The wound closes, the flesh mends. But the scar across his torso, that mark left by the eagle's passage, never fully fades. It is a reminder, perhaps, or a warning, or simply evidence of suffering beyond measure. How long did this continue? In mythology, Prometheus endured this torment for thousands of years. Some sources say 30,000 years, though time means little to the immortal. In the world of Hades too, we know only that it was long enough to break anyone, long enough to transform the benefactor of humanity into something harder, colder, more calculating. Long enough that when liberation finally came, Prometheus was no longer the same being who had stolen fire from the gods. The gods themselves could hear his screams from Olympus. Zeus, who had ordered this punishment, heard them and smiled, for they served as warning to any who would defy the king of the gods. The other Olympians heard them and turned away, uncomfortable with the reminder of their own capacity for cruelty, preferring to speak of justice and necessity rather than acknowledge what those screams truly represented. Only a few, perhaps, felt the stirring of something like guilt. But guilt changes nothing when set against the will of Zeus. But this eternal torment, this daily death without dying, this is not where Prometheus's story begins. To understand why the Firebringer now stands against the very gods he once aided, why he fights for Chronos despite his gift of foresight, surely showing him the ultimate outcome, we must journey back before the chains, back before the eagle, back to a time when Titans ruled the earth and the Olympian gods were but children plotting revolution in secret. Back to the beginning, when Prometheus first made a choice that would echo through all the ages to come. And Part 2, the first betrayal, choosing the gods. In the beginning, before Zeus's lightning split the sky, before Poseidon claimed the seas, before Hades descended into the deep places of the earth to rule the dead, there were the Titans. 12 children of Gaia. The earth and Uranus the sky, beings of immense power who embodied the fundamental forces of the cosmos itself. They were not evil, not inherently cruel, though cruelty came easily to them. They were simply the first, and in being first, they believed themselves supreme. Chronos, though some would spell it Chronos, the two names having blended through ages of telling and retelling, ruled as king among the Titans. He was time itself made manifest. the turning of seasons, the aging of all things, the inevitable march toward endings. His reign was what he called a golden age, a time of order and certainty where all things moved according to his design. But to his children, it felt more like a prison, a cage made of inevitability. For Chronos, plagued by prophecy that foretold his own overthrow by his offspring, had committed an act of terrible pragmatism. As each of his children with Rhea was born, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, he swallowed them whole, imprisoning them within himself where they could not grow strong enough to fulfill the prophecy. But Rhea, mother of these stolen children, could bear the loss no longer. When Zeus was born, she hid him away on the island of Crete, presenting Chronos with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. And Chronos, perhaps blinded by his own certainty or perhaps simply not caring, swallowed the stone and believed himself safe. Zeus grew in secret, nursed by the goat Amalthea, raised by nymphs and warriors who taught him the arts of battle and strategy. And as he grew, he learned of his siblings, imprisoned in their father's belly, alive but unable to escape. He learned of the Titans' cruelty, their casual disregard for anyone weaker than themselves. And he began to plan. But Zeus, clever as he was, knew he could not challenge the Titans alone. He would need allies. He would need the Titans themselves to turn against one another. Enter Prometheus, son of the Titan Iapetus and the Oceanid Clymene, brother to Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, and to Atlas, who would one day bear the weight of the sky upon his shoulders. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, possessed a gift that set him apart even among Titans. He could see what was to come, not perfectly, not with absolute certainty, but enough. Enough to know that Zeus's rebellion, impossible as it seemed, would succeed. Imagine the weight of that knowledge. Prometheus stood among his own kind, the Titans who had ruled since before memory, and he saw their downfall approach like an oncoming storm. He saw the war that would consume the world, the Titanomachy that would rage for 10 years and reshape the very foundations of reality. And he saw which side would emerge victorious. The choice before him was not simply strategic, it was deeply personal. To side with Zeus meant turning against his own father Iapetus, against his brother Atlas, against the entire order of the world as it had always existed. It meant being called traitor by those who shared his blood. But to stand with the Titans meant fighting for a cause already lost, dying or being imprisoned in Tartarus for a war he knew could not be won. Prometheus chose the future over the past. He chose the young gods over the old Titans. And in making this choice, he committed what would be the first of his great betrayals. Though at the time, it seemed like wisdom rather than treachery. He approached Zeus in secret, offering his services as advisor and prophet. He explained the weaknesses of the Titans, their overconfidence in their own power, their failure to adapt or change. He suggested strategies, pointed out which of the Titans might be persuaded to switch sides, identified where the battlefields of the Titanomachy would be most advantageous to the younger gods. Some say he even helped forge the thunderbolts that Zeus would wield, or at least advised Hephaestus in their creation. The war began. Heaven and earth shook with the fury of it. Titans and gods clashed in battles that reshaped continents, that boiled seas and split mountains. Zeus wielded his lightning, Hades his helm of darkness, Poseidon his earthquake-summoning trident. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, even forged weapons of terrible power, though she would later cast them into Tartarus, fearing what mortals might do with such tools. And on the other side, the Titans fought with the strength of beings who had ruled since the dawn of time. Atlas's might was unmatched in close combat. Hyperion, The cruelest of them, according to some accounts, led forces with ruthless efficiency. Iapetus himself, Prometheus's own father, commanded legions that should have crushed the rebellion in its infancy. But they lost. Despite their power, despite their confidence, despite everything they believed about their own supremacy, they lost. Not because they were weak, but because they could not see what Prometheus had already foreseen. That times change, that all reigns must end, that even the Titans themselves were subject to the very forces they embodied. When the dust settled and the screams faded, the surviving Titans faced judgment. Zeus and his siblings, now freed from their father's stomach by a trick that forced Chronos to regurgitate them, showed no mercy. Chronos himself was bound and dismembered, his body cut into pieces with his own scythe, each fragment cast into the deepest pits of Tartarus so that he could never reform, never return. Atlas was condemned to hold up the sky itself, an eternal punishment that would make his strength a burden rather than a gift. Iapetus and the other Titans who had fought against the gods were similarly imprisoned in Tartarus, locked away where their power could no longer threaten the new order. But Prometheus was spared. He had sided with the victors after all. He had helped secure their triumph. Zeus, grateful for the Titans' aid and perhaps wary of his foresight, granted him a place in the new world. Prometheus would advise the gods, serve as counselor and prophet, use his gift to help maintain the order that had just been established at such terrible cost. It seemed for a time that Prometheus had made the right choice. He lived free while his brothers suffered. He walked among the gods as an honored guest while his father rotted in Tartarus. He had backed the winning side, and now he would reap the rewards of victory. But Prometheus's gift of foresight was both blessing and curse. He could see not just the war's outcome, but what would come after. He could see the seeds of future suffering already planted in the soil of the Olympians' victory. And in his quieter moments, perhaps he wondered, had he truly chosen wisdom or merely self-preservation? Had he betrayed his kind for the right reasons, or simply because he lacked the courage to stand with the losing side? These questions would haunt him in the centuries to come. But for now, in the aftermath of the Titanomachy, Prometheus focused on his new role. The gods had won the war. Now came the more difficult task, building a world to rule over. And in that building, Prometheus would make decisions that would ultimately lead him to the chains, to the eagle, to the price that must be paid for defying Zeus. For there was something the new gods had not yet created, something that would change everything: humanity itself. Part 3. The Gift of Fire, Love and Theft. After the Titanomachy, when the world still smoldered from divine conflict and the sky itself seemed wounded, the Olympian gods set about establishing their new order. Zeus claimed dominion over the heavens, hurling his lightning from a throne atop Mount Olympus. Poseidon took the seas, his trident commanding tides and storms. Hades, though he would later claim he drew this lot unwillingly, descended into the underworld to rule over the dead. The goddesses, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, carved out their own domains of influence, shaping the world according to their desires and temperaments. But the earth, for all its grandeur, felt empty. The Titans who had once populated it were gone, imprisoned or scattered. The primordial beings had retreated into deeper mysteries. The world was won, but there was no one to acknowledge the victory, no one to worship the victors, no one to justify the sacrifice and suffering of the war. This is where classical mythology tells us that Prometheus performed perhaps his greatest act of creation. From the clay of the earth itself, from the same substance that formed mountains and valleys, Prometheus molded figures in the image of the gods themselves. He shaped them with care, giving them upright stature, hands capable of crafting and creating, faces that could look up at the heavens rather than down at the ground like beasts. And into these clay figures, he breathed life. Now, Hades 2 doesn't explicitly confirm or deny this origin for humanity. The game focuses more on Prometheus's role as humanity's benefactor and teacher rather than creator. But there's a fascinating detail buried in his dialogue with Melinoë. He refers to mortals in ways that suggest a paternal, protective relationship that goes deeper than simple admiration. When discussing Pandora, known as Dora in the game, he tells Melinoë that Dora should not hold herself responsible for the failings of mankind. The phrasing is interesting. Not the failings of humans or mortal weakness, but mankind, as if they are, in some sense, his kind, his creation, his responsibility. Whether Prometheus literally crafted humanity from clay, or simply feels responsible for them as their first champion and teacher, the game leaves deliberately ambiguous. What matters is that he sees them as his, and that connection, that sense of ownership and protective love, drives everything he does. Humanity was born one way or another, and from the beginning, they were vulnerable. But these first humans were pitiful things, helpless as newborns, ignorant of everything beyond their immediate needs. They could not build shelter from the cold. They could not forge tools to hunt or plant crops to sustain themselves. They huddled in caves, afraid of the dark, terrified of the predators that stalked them, living brief, brutal lives that seemed hardly worth the effort of Prometheus's creation. Prometheus looked at his creation with something like a father's love, or perhaps the pride of an artist seeing his masterpiece diminished. These beings had such potential, such capacity for growth and learning, but they were trapped by their limitations, denied the fundamental tools they needed to survive and flourish. The gods, for their part, showed little interest in these mud-born creatures. They were useful, perhaps, for sacrifices, for offerings to feed the divine. Zeus decreed that humans must regularly sacrifice animals to the gods, giving the immortals their due tribute. But beyond that, humans were beneath notice, too weak and short-lived to matter in the grand schemes of immortal beings. Prometheus saw injustice in this. He saw these creatures he had made, suffering and struggling, while the gods lounged in splendor atop Olympus, never knowing hunger or cold or fear. And his gift of foresight showed him something more, showed him what humanity could become, given the right tools, the right knowledge. He saw cities rising from plains, art and music flowering in halls of marble, philosophy and science pushing back the boundaries of ignorance. He saw the potential for magnificence. But to reach that potential, humanity needed help. They needed a champion. And Prometheus, perhaps remembering his own choice to turn against his kind for what he believed was right, decided he would be that champion, regardless of the cost. The first conflict came at a place called Mythology during a sacrifice. Zeus had demanded his tribute, and an ox was slaughtered to feed the gods. But Prometheus saw an opportunity for a small trick, a test of sorts. He divided the ox into 2 portions. In one, he placed all the meat, the rich and nourishing flesh that could sustain his humans through cold nights. But he wrapped this portion in the ox's stomach, making it look unappetizing and worthless. In the other portion, he placed only bones and fat, but wrapped these in the finest cuts of hide, making them appear delicious and valuable. Then he presented both portions to Zeus and invited the king of the gods to choose his share first. The other would go to humanity. Zeus, confident in his own supremacy, chose the portion that appeared more valuable. He selected the bones and fat, leaving the meat for the mortals. But when he unwrapped his choice and discovered the deception, His rage shook Olympus itself. Thunder roared. Lightning split the sky. The other gods cowered before the fury of their king. Prometheus had made Zeus look foolish, had tricked the Lord of Gods like a common mark in a street con. This could not stand. This demanded punishment. But Zeus was clever in his cruelty. He would not strike directly at Prometheus. Not yet. Instead, he would punish the humans that the Titan clearly loved. Zeus declared that humanity would no longer have access to fire. The sacred flame that lit their caves, that warmed them through bitter winters, that allowed them to cook their food and see through darkness. This would be taken from them. Let them freeze and starve and stumble blindly, Zeus proclaimed. Let them understand the price of having a protector who defied the gods. And so fire vanished from the mortal realm. Every hearth went cold, every torch sputtered and died. Humanity, already struggling, now faced extinction. They could not survive without fire. Within a generation, perhaps less, they would be gone, and Prometheus's creation would be nothing more than bones scattered across a hostile world. Prometheus watched this unfold with growing horror. His trick at Mythology, meant to help humanity, had instead doomed them. His defiance of Zeus, meant to strike a blow for justice, had brought only suffering to those he sought to protect. And his foresight showed him the inevitable end. Humans dying in the dark, his creation unmade by his own actions. He could not allow it. He would not. On a night when storms raged around Olympus, when Zeus's attention was turned to other matters, Prometheus made his way to the forge of Hephaestus, the god of metalwork and craft. The divine fire burned there eternally, the very source of creation itself, the flame from which the gods drew power to shape reality. It was forbidden to mortals, guarded by laws older than the Olympian gods themselves. Prometheus did not care. He broke the hollowed stem from a fennel stalk, a plant whose pith could hold a coal for hours without being consumed, and approached the sacred flame. Perhaps he hesitated for a moment, knowing what would come next, seeing in his mind's eye the chains and the eagle and the endless centuries of torment. Perhaps he wondered if there was another way, some clever trick that could achieve his goal without bringing down Zeus's wrath so completely. But then he thought of humanity, huddled in their caves, watching their children die of cold, unable to protect themselves from the darkness. And he reached out and took the fire. The flame caught in the fennel stalk, glowing bright and hot, alive with possibility. Prometheus concealed it within his robes and fled from Olympus, racing down the mountain before any could notice what he had done. He ran through the night to the mortal realm, to the caves and primitive shelters where humanity waited unknowing. And he gave them fire. Not just the flame itself, but knowledge of how to use it, how to maintain it, how to create it anew from flint and friction. He taught them to cook, to forge metal, to clear forests for farmland. He showed them how to use fire to ward off predators, to light the darkness, to signal to one another across great distances. Fire became the foundation of human civilization in that moment, the tool that would lift them from mere survival to something approaching greatness. But Prometheus did not stop there. In mythology, we are told he gave humanity other gifts as well. He taught them mathematics and astronomy, showed them how to navigate by stars and predict the seasons. He gave them writing, so that knowledge could be preserved beyond a single lifetime. He introduced medicine, architecture, agriculture, all the arts and sciences that would allow humans not just to survive, but to thrive. From Athena, goddess of wisdom, he obtained the gift of reason itself. Not all humans possessed it in equal measure, as Athena herself would later comment. But enough of them gained the capacity for rational thought that humanity as a whole could begin to question, to wonder, to seek understanding of the world around them. In the world of Hades too, this relationship between Prometheus and Athena is particularly poignant. Athena speaks of having known Prometheus before his punishment, of connecting with him over their shared tendencies towards matters of the mind. She gave him reason to bestow upon humanity, participated in his grand project of elevating the mortals. Later, after everything that follows, she will acknowledge that his vengeance against the gods is warranted, that his suffering was unjust. Even divine wisdom can recognize injustice when forced to confront it directly. For a time, perhaps, Prometheus believed he might escape punishment. Zeus had been tricked before without such terrible consequences. Perhaps the king of the gods would accept this latest theft, would see the value in having worshippers who were capable of building temples and offering sophisticated prayers. Perhaps Prometheus's foresight had shown him a future where this gamble paid off. But he knew better. Deep down, in the place where even titans feel fear, Prometheus knew what was coming. He had seen it, after all. His gift of foresight left no room for comfortable delusions. When Zeus discovered the theft, and Zeus would discover it, inevitably, there would be a reckoning. There would be punishment beyond anything the Titan had ever imagined. And yet he did it anyway. Knowing the price, seeing the cost, understanding that what he was about to endure would be worse than death, Prometheus chose to give humanity fire. He chose them over his own well-being. He chose their potential over his comfort. He chose to play the role of benefactor and champion, even if it meant becoming a cautionary tale. Zeus, of course, discovered the theft. How could he not? Fire blazed from human settlements across the world, a testament to Prometheus's defiance, visible from Olympus itself. The king of the gods stood on his throne and saw humanity thriving where he had intended them to perish. He saw them building and learning and growing strong, and he understood with perfect clarity that Prometheus had defied him not once, not twice, but repeatedly. The trick at Mythology, the theft of fire, the teaching of arts and sciences, each act a declaration that the Titan did not recognize Zeus's authority, did not fear the god's power, did not accept the order that had been established. This could not stand. This demanded a response so severe, so terrible, that no one, mortal or immortal, would ever dare to defy Zeus again. But Zeus's cruelty was patient, calculated. Before he moved against Prometheus directly, he would punish humanity one more time. He commanded Hephaestus to forge a woman, the first woman, for Prometheus had made only men from clay. Pandora, she would be called, all gifted, for each of the gods contributed something to her creation. Aphrodite gave her beauty, Athena gave her grace, Hermes gave her cunning, and Zeus gave her a jar, sealed shut, with instructions never to open it under any circumstances. Pandora was sent to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother, whose name meant afterthought, for good reason. Despite Prometheus's warnings to accept no gifts from Zeus, Epimetheus saw Pandora and immediately fell in love. He married her, welcomed her into his home, and thus brought Zeus's final punishment into the mortal world. Curiosity eventually proved stronger than obedience. Pandora opened the jar, and from it flew all the evils that had been contained within: disease and death, hatred and envy, fear and despair. They spread across the world like a plague, infecting humanity with suffering that would never fully depart. Only one thing remained in the jar when Pandora finally managed to close it again: hope. trapped at the bottom. A small comfort in a world suddenly much darker. Some interpret this as a cruelty, that Zeus trapped hope to deny it to humanity. Others see it as a mercy, that hope alone remained protected, unable to be lost or destroyed like the other goods of the world. But regardless of interpretation, the message was clear. Humanity would suffer for Prometheus's love of them. Their lives would be short, painful, full of illness and betrayal and loss. The fire might warm them, but it could not protect them from the consequences of having a champion who defied the gods. And now, finally, Zeus turned his attention to Prometheus himself. Part 4. The Eagle's Descent, Millennial Torment. The soldiers came for Prometheus at dawn, when the light was still gentle and the world seemed, for a moment, at peace. They were not surprised to find him waiting, making no effort to flee or hide. Prometheus had seen this moment 1,000 times in the visions granted by his foresight. He knew that resistance was futile, that the chains were inevitable, that the punishment Zeus had devised could not be avoided by any cleverness or trick. So he stood calmly as they bound his wrists with chains forged in Hephaestus's workshop, links of adamantine that could never break, enchanted with Zeus's power so that not even Titan's strength could shatter them. He walked willingly, following his captors up the slopes of the mountain, each step taking him closer to his doom. They brought him to the peak, Mount Caucasus in the old tales. Though in the world of Hades too, it seems this punishment took place on Mount Olympus itself, a crueler irony. Prometheus would suffer within sight of the palace he had helped the gods win, his screams echoing through halls where the Olympians feasted and celebrated their supremacy. He would be a living reminder of what befell those who defied Zeus's will, a warning carved in flesh and pain. The chains were fastened to the living rock, bolted into stone, with spikes that would never rust or weaken. Prometheus was positioned spread-eagle, his arms extended, his chest exposed, unable to protect himself from what came next. The guards stepped back, their duty complete, leaving the Titan alone with his thoughts and his foresight and his knowledge of every moment yet to come. Zeus himself appeared, manifesting in a corona of lightning, his presence so overwhelming that the air itself seemed to thicken. He looked at Prometheus with something between satisfaction and regret. Satisfaction at having captured the thief, regret perhaps that such measures were necessary, though not enough regret to show mercy. "You were warned," Zeus said, his voice like thunder rolling across distant hills. "You were told what would happen if you defied me. Yet you chose this path. You chose your clay-born pets over your own welfare. Very well. Let us see how long that choice satisfies you." Zeus raised his hand, and the sky darkened. And from that darkness, descending on wings that blotted out the sun, came the eagle. The creature was enormous, far larger than any natural bird, with eyes that gleamed with terrible intelligence. Some accounts claim it was spawned from Typhon and Echidna, monsters whose children were themselves monstrosities. Others say Hephaestus forged it from bronze and divine fire, creating an automaton that would never tire, never question, never show mercy. Still others insist it was simply an eagle blessed by Zeus, enlarged and empowered to serve as the perfect instrument of eternal torment. But in the world of Hades too, we learn something different. The eagle, named Aetos in this telling, was not initially malicious. It was simply following its nature, serving its master, performing the function for which it had been created or commanded. And later, much later, after Prometheus was freed, Aetos would become something else entirely, a companion, trained and tamed, fighting alongside the Titan it once tormented. This transformation speaks to the complicated nature of suffering and absolution, of how victims and instruments of torture might eventually find understanding between them. But in that first moment, when Athos descended upon the chained Prometheus, there was no understanding, no compassion, no mercy. There was only pain. The eagle landed on Prometheus's chest, talons digging into immortal flesh, drawing blood that shimmered with inner light. It cocked its head, studying the Titan with those terrible eyes, perhaps waiting for a sign of fear or some plea for mercy. But Prometheus, who had foreseen this moment in exacting detail, who had experienced this pain 1,000 times in vision before feeling it in reality, said nothing. He only looked at the eagle with something like sorrow in his eyes, as if apologizing to the creature for what it had been forced to become. The beak struck, tearing through skin and muscle, cracking ribs with the sound of breaking branches. Prometheus screamed. He could not help but scream. The pain was beyond any ability to endure silently. But he did not beg. Through the agony, through the feeling of his own liver being torn from his body piece by piece, he maintained that core of defiance that had brought him to this moment. The ancient Greeks believed the liver was the seat of emotion, the organ where feelings dwelled and multiplied. Whether Zeus knew this and chose the liver deliberately, or whether it was simply the organ most convenient for the eagle to reach, the symbolism remains powerful. Each day, Prometheus's capacity to feel was consumed. Each day, his emotions were devoured. Each day, he was forced to endure the destruction of the very part of him that had felt love for humanity, that had felt anger at injustice, that had felt the courage necessary to defy the king of the gods. The eagle ate its fill slowly, methodically, as if savoring each bite. When it was finished, when Prometheus's chest was a ruin of blood and exposed bone, Athos spread its wings and departed, flying back to whatever airy Zeus had prepared for it. And Prometheus was left alone, chained to the rock, dying but unable to die, suffering but unable to escape into unconsciousness. As night fell and darkness covered the peak, Prometheus's immortal body began its terrible work. Flesh knitted back together, cell by agonizing cell. Bones reformed, snapping back into place with sounds that echoed across empty slopes. And the liver grew back completely, regenerating from whatever small fragments the eagle had left behind, becoming whole and healthy and ready to be consumed again when dawn came. This was the punishment Zeus had devised, not death, which would be merciful, not imprisonment, which would at least offer time for thought and planning, but endless cyclical suffering, pain without purpose, torment without meaning, an eternal demonstration that defying Zeus brought only endless agony. How long did this continue? The myths speak of 30,000 years, though such numbers are difficult for mortal minds to comprehend. In the world of Hades too, we know only that it was millennia, a span of time so vast that civilizations rose and fell, that the humans Prometheus had saved grew and spread across the world, that history itself marched forward, while the Titan remained frozen in his moment of punishment. 3 decades became 3 centuries, became 3 millennia. The world changed around him. The humans he had helped thrived, building cities and forging empires, creating art and philosophy and science, reaching toward the potential he had seen in them. But Prometheus saw none of this. He knew only the rock and the chains and the daily visit of the eagle. And slowly, gradually, the experience transformed him. The Prometheus who had stolen fire for love of humanity began to change into something harder, colder, more filled with hatred than compassion. He had borne this suffering for them, for the mortals who went about their brief lives, never knowing what price had been paid for their comfort. And while he never blamed humanity itself, never regretted his choice to help them. He grew to hate the gods who had imposed such cruelty for such a small crime. Zeus and his Olympians continued their rule, deaf to Prometheus's screams or choosing to ignore them. They held their feasts and fought their petty squabbles and pursued their pleasures, secure in the knowledge that their power was absolute, their authority unquestionable. They had made an example of Prometheus after all. Who would dare challenge them now? But time has a way of eroding even divine certainties. And in the darkness of Tartarus, in the deepest pits where the Titans had been imprisoned, Chronos, sliced into pieces, scattered and seemingly destroyed, began impossibly to heal. Time itself cannot be truly killed, it seems. Time, patient and inevitable, simply waits for its moment to return. Part 5. Liberation and Obligation. Heracles comes centuries upon centuries past, the world turning beneath Prometheus's chained form, and the Titan's consciousness began to fragment under the weight of endless suffering. Days blurred together until he could no longer distinguish one from another. The eagle's visits became a rhythm like heartbeat, like breathing, an inevitability so fundamental that it ceased to feel like an external attack and became simply part of existence itself. But Prometheus's gift of foresight, even dulled by millennia of torment, still functioned. And one day, in the visions that came between the eagle's departure and the night's regeneration, he saw something new. He saw a figure approaching up the mountain path, a man of tremendous ease and strength, bearing a bow and arrows, his expression grim with purpose. Heracles, or Hercules, as the Romans would later name him, was in the midst of his legendary 12 labors, those impossible tasks set before him as penance for crimes committed in a fit of madness induced by Hera's curse. The son of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene, Heracles possessed strength beyond any ordinary human, blessed with divine power that made him capable of feats no normal man could achieve. His 11th labor had brought him to this region, searching for the golden apples of the Hesperides. But Prometheus, even in his suffering, had knowledge that Heracles needed, information about where to find the apples, and more importantly, how to obtain them without dooming himself in the process. Prometheus knew, because he could see it, that the hero would need to convince Atlas, his own brother, to fetch the apples while Heracles temporarily bore the weight of the sky. But more than this practical exchange, Prometheus knew something else, something that would change everything. He possessed knowledge of a prophecy that Zeus desperately needed to hear. The sea goddess Thetis, with whom Zeus had become infatuated, was fated to bear a son greater than his father. If Zeus fathered a child with her, that child would eventually overthrow him, just as Zeus had overthrown Chronos, just as Chronos had overthrown Uranus. The cycle would continue. But Zeus did not know this. He pursued Thetis, unaware that his desire would lead to his own downfall. Only Prometheus knew, and he had kept this knowledge secret for millennia, hoarding it like a treasure, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Because this knowledge was power, the only power he had left, the single bargaining chip that might purchase his freedom. When Heracles arrived at the summit where Prometheus was chained, the hero saw the Titan's suffering and felt something stir within him. Perhaps pity, perhaps admiration for one who had endured so much, perhaps simply the recognition of a kindred spirit. For Heracles too had been punished by the gods for crimes both real and imagined. He too bore the weight of divine cruelty, forced to perform impossible labors as penance for Hera's jealous wrath. He too knew what it meant to suffer for the sins and grievances of those more powerful than himself. The eagle came that day as it always did, descending from the sky with wings spread wide, ready to feast. but this time it did not complete its terrible purpose. Heracles drew his bow, nocked an arrow, and let it fly. The shaft struck true, piercing the eagle's heart, if it had a heart, and sending the creature tumbling from the sky to crash lifelessly against the rocks far below. Athos was dead. The instrument of Zeus's vengeance was destroyed, and Prometheus, for the first time in millennia, was spared the daily torment. But the chains remained. The adamantine links, forged in Hephaestus's workshop and sealed with Zeus's power, could not be broken by mortal strength, not even strength as formidable as Heracles possessed. The hero might have killed the eagle, but freeing Prometheus required something more. Zeus's permission, a loosening of the spell that bound the Titan to the rock. This is where Prometheus made his gamble, playing the only card he had left. He told Heracles of the prophecy concerning Thetis, explained how Zeus's pursuit of the sea goddess would lead to his own downfall, and he asked Heracles to deliver this information to Zeus, to warn the king of the gods of the danger he faced, in exchange for Prometheus's freedom. Heracles agreed. He descended from the mountain and made his way to Olympus, where he relayed Prometheus's warning to his father. Zeus, confronted with this knowledge, was forced to acknowledge the truth of it. The fates themselves confirmed the prophecy. His desire for Thetis, if consummated, would produce the son who would overthrow him. The cycle he had broken by overthrowing Chronos would begin again, and he would become the victim rather than the victor. Zeus made his choice. He abandoned his pursuit of Thetis, arranging instead for her to marry a mortal, Peleus. Their son would indeed be greater than his father, but since his father was mortal, this posed no threat to Zeus's rule. The child born of that union would be Achilles, greatest of the Greek heroes, whose glory would shine bright and brief like a falling star. And having received this warning, having been saved from his own downfall by the very Titan he had tormented, Zeus relented. He allowed Heracles to strike the chains, to shatter the adamantine links that had held Prometheus for so long. The spell was broken. The Titan was free. But freedom, Prometheus would discover, came with complications. Zeus, in a gesture that was either mercy or mockery, decreed that Prometheus must forever wear a ring made from the stone of his prison and a link from his chains. This would serve as reminder of his punishment, a symbol that his crimes had not been forgotten, even if they had been forgiven. The weight might be gone, but the memory would remain, bound to Prometheus as surely as the chains themselves had been. Additionally, to satisfy the letter of Zeus's original decree that Prometheus must be eternally bound to the mountain, Heracles fashioned a wreath from the plants growing on the peak. Prometheus wore this crown, and in doing so, technically remained bound to the mountain while physically free to leave it. A legal fiction, perhaps, but one that allowed both Zeus to maintain his decree, was honored, and Prometheus to walk free. It was characteristic of the gods' logic, cruel in implementation, but flexible in technicality. And there was one more complication, one more thread woven into Prometheus's liberation that would have profound consequences in the centuries to come. Heracles and Prometheus formed a bond that day, something deeper than simple gratitude. The hero had saved the Titan, yes, but more than that, they had seen in each other a reflection of their own suffering. Both had been victims of divine cruelty. Both had endured suffering that should have broken them. Both had maintained some core of defiance, even under the weight of impossible punishment. In the world of Hades too, this bond takes a specific form, an oath between them, unspoken in its exact details, but binding nonetheless. When Prometheus, millennia later, takes his stand with Chronos against the Olympians, Heracles will feel compelled to aid him despite his own complicated loyalty to Zeus, his father. The oath whatever its exact terms, will draw Heracles to fight alongside the Titan in battles against Melinoë, the young goddess trying to stop Chronos' war. This reveals something profound about Prometheus's character, something that would remain consistent even through his transformation into Chronos' general. He inspires loyalty even in those who should oppose him. Heracles, devoted son of Zeus, blessed by the king of the gods, elevated to Olympus itself upon his death. This hero will choose to honor his debt to Prometheus over his duty to his father. That speaks to the kind of person Prometheus had been before the chains, and hints at the person he might still be beneath the hatred and desire for vengeance. But that is looking ahead. For now, newly freed, Prometheus stood on the mountain peak where he had suffered for so long, and felt the wind on his face for the first time in millennia. The chains were gone. The eagle was dead. He was free to walk, to move, to act according to his own will, rather than submit to the daily cycle of torment and regeneration. Yet the damage was done. The Prometheus who descended from that mountain was not the same being who had ascended it in chains so many centuries before. The love for humanity that had motivated his theft of fire remained, yes, but it was now wrapped in layers of bitterness and rage. The admiration he had once felt for the gods' potential had curdled into contempt for their cruelty. The hope he had harbored that Zeus might eventually see reason, might acknowledge the injustice of such extreme punishment, had died long ago. Probably somewhere around the 1000th time, the eagle had torn out his liver. He was free. But he was also fundamentally broken. His personality reshaped by millennia of suffering into something colder, harder, more capable of terrible actions in pursuit of what he believed was justice. The Titan who walked down from that mountain was one who had learned a lesson. The gods were not worthy of their power. Their rule was maintained only by fear and force, and they would never willingly relinquish control or admit their own cruelty. This lesson would take centuries to fully blossom into action. But it had been planted, watered with blood and pain, grown in the darkness of endless torment. And one day, when circumstances aligned, when Chronos rose again and offered Prometheus a chance at revenge, that lesson would bear its terrible fruit. For now, though, Prometheus had other concerns. Chief among them, the eagle. Atos, killed by Heracles' arrow, slain in the act of performing the duty Zeus had assigned it. Prometheus retrieved the creature's body from where it had fallen, and through means not fully explained in the lore, revived it. Perhaps his gift of foresight extended to this outcome, saw a future where Atos served a different master, fought for a different cause. Perhaps he simply felt a strange kinship with the creature that had been forced into the role of tormentor, understanding that Atos had no more choice in the matter than Prometheus himself. Whatever the reason, Prometheus saved the eagle, tamed it, trained it to fight alongside him rather than against him. The instrument of his torture became his companion, his ally, eventually taking the name Atos and serving as Prometheus's familiar in battles yet to come. This transformation, from tormentor to companion, serves as metaphor for the complicated relationship between suffering and healing, between vengeance and forgiveness. But that healing, such as it was, would take centuries, and the forgiveness, if it could be called that, would never extend to the gods themselves. And here, right here, is where we need to pause, because there's something about this story that doesn't add up, something the game hints at but never states outright, something that changes everything once you see it. Prometheus can see the future. That's his defining trait, his gift, his curse. He sided with Zeus in the Titanomachy because he foresaw the Olympians would win. Every major decision he's made, stealing fire, accepting punishment, allying with Chronos, has been informed by visions of what's to come. So ask yourself this. When Prometheus looks into the future and sees Chronos' war against Olympus, what does he actually see? According to the law explicitly stated in Hades 2, Prometheus foresaw Chronos' victory. That's why he allied with the Titan of Time. He chose to back what he believed would be the winning side. But here's the thing. Prometheus also explicitly tells Melinoë multiple times throughout their battles that he knows she will eventually defeat him. He envisions multiple futures and sees his own defeat as inevitable, even if postponed. Wait. Stop. Read that again. Prometheus foresaw Chronos winning, but he also foresees his own defeat at Melinoë's hands. Those two futures can't both be true, unless Prometheus is lying. Not to Melinoë, to Chronos, to everyone, to us. What if the Titan of Foresight never actually saw Chronos winning at all? What if, from the very beginning, from the moment Chronos first approached him with an offer of alliance and revenge, Prometheus saw the full arc of the war and knew exactly how it would end? With Chronos defeated, with the Olympians restored, with Melinoë as the hero who saves the day. And what if he joined Chronos anyway? Not in spite of seeing this outcome, but because of it. We'll come back to this. For now, just hold on to that question as we continue forward. Because if Prometheus knew from the start that Chronos would lose, then everything he does, every battle, every speech, every philosophical challenge he throws at Melinoë, suddenly takes on a very different meaning. The Firebringer isn't trying to win a war. He's trying to change what victory means. Part 6. The wound that never heals. Years became decades, became centuries, and Prometheus wandered the world as a free being, the chains gone, but their memory etched into his very essence. He wore the ring Zeus had mandated, the constant reminder of his punishment, and though the physical weight was minimal, the psychological burden grew heavier with each passing year. Because freedom, he discovered, did not erase memory. Liberty did not undo trauma. Being released from torture did not mean the suffering ended. It only meant the suffering changed form. The scar across his torso, that terrible diagonal mark from left shoulder to right hip where Athos had torn into him day after day for millennia, never fully healed. It remained as visible reminder, a testament to what he had endured. In the world of Hades 2, this scar is prominently displayed on Prometheus's character design, his upper body bare to show the mark of his punishment. Every time he catches sight of it, every time he feels the phantom pain that immortal flesh remembers, even when current wounds are absent, he is transported back to that moment of daily agony. This is something that mortals who suffer trauma understand all too well, but that gods and titans, being essentially immortal, experience differently. For a mortal, trauma might last a lifetime, but that lifetime is mercifully brief. The victim eventually passes beyond suffering into the quietude of death. But for an immortal, trauma is not a chapter in a life, but a permanent scar on an eternal existence. Prometheus would carry that wound and that memory not for 70 or 80 years, but forever. Until the end of time itself. There was no escaping it, no growing old and dying and finding peace in oblivion. So he carried it, and it changed him. The Prometheus who loved humanity enough to steal fire for them, who saw potential in mortals and wanted to help them flourish. That Prometheus did not disappear entirely, but he became more complicated, layered with bitterness and anger, and a profound disillusionment with divine rule. He watched the Olympian gods continue their reign, observed how they treated mortals with casual cruelty, how they used humans as toys or prizes or punishments in their petty divine squabbles. He saw Athena turn Arachne into a spider for the crime of being a better weaver than the goddess. Never mind that Arachne was simply exercising the skill she had been born with, or that competition should inspire improvement rather than punishment. Athena could not bear being surpassed by a mortal, and so she cursed the Weaver to live out eternity in a form that mocked her greatest talent. He saw Hera punish Heracles, his own liberator, for the crime of being Zeus's bastard son. Never mind that Heracles had no choice in his parentage, bore no responsibility for Zeus's infidelities. Hera's jealousy demanded an outlet, and so she drove Heracles to madness, made him murder his own family, condemned him to perform 12 impossible labors as penance for crimes he committed while insane. The punishment was unjust from every angle, yet it stood unchallenged because Hera's power made it unchallengeable. He witnessed Poseidon's treatment of Polyphemus, the Cyclops who served Chronos in the Second Titan War. The god lied about being the Cyclops' father, used him, and then abandoned him, leaving Polyphemus with bitterness that would eventually lead him to oppose the Olympians when Chronos rose again. Everywhere Prometheus looked, he saw the gods perpetuating the same cycle of cruelty that had been inflicted upon him. They demanded worship, but showed no wisdom. They claimed supremacy, but demonstrated only power. They spoke of justice, but practiced only vengeance. And slowly, inexorably, Prometheus came to a conclusion that would shape everything that followed. The Olympians were not fit to rule. They had won the Titanomachy, yes, but victory in war does not equate to wisdom in peace. They had overthrown Chronos, but they had not actually improved upon his rule. They had simply replaced one tyranny with another, one that was perhaps more chaotic and petty than Chronos' rigid order had ever been. More than this, Prometheus began to develop a grudge, not just against the Olympians, but against all deities, including himself. The problem, he came to believe, was divinity itself. Gods and titans alike were too powerful, too removed from consequence, too capable of inflicting suffering without feeling its weight. Mortals learned from pain because they had to. Their brief lives demanded adaptation, empathy, growth. But immortals could be cruel forever, suffering no real cost for their cruelty, learning nothing because they never had to. This philosophical conclusion would have profound implications. Prometheus, in his dialogue with Melinoë in Hades 2, expresses this clearly when he speaks of opposing all deities, especially himself. He has come to see his own kind, his own nature, as fundamentally corrupt. The only beings worthy of flourishing, in his view, are mortals. Those short-lived, vulnerable creatures who must band together and learn compassion simply to assert. But this belief created a paradox. If Prometheus opposed all deities, including himself, if he believed divine rule was inherently unjust, what was the alternative? Humanity could not rule themselves while gods walked among them. Divine power was simply too overwhelming. Mortals would always be subject to the whims of immortals unless the immortals were somehow removed from the equation entirely. Perhaps this is where Prometheus's foresight became both blessing and curse once more. He could see futures, could perceive how events might unfold, but he could not see a path forward that did not require his own participation. He hated divine rule, but he was himself divine. He wanted mortals to flourish, but they needed protection from the gods, and who could protect them except another god? He desired justice, but justice would require power, and power was the very thing he had come to despise. He was trapped in a philosophical prison as inescapable as the chains had been physical ones. And this prison, this cage of contradictions and impossible choices, would shape his decisions in the centuries to come. During this period of wandering and internal struggle, Prometheus encountered many of the figures who would later play roles in the Second Titan War. He met Pandora, or Dora, as she is known in Hades too, the woman created by Zeus as punishment for humanity, but who had become something more than her creator intended. Prometheus and Dora developed some relationship, the exact nature of which remains unclear, but significant enough that when Melinoë encounters Dora in the crossroads, Prometheus speaks of how she forgot her memories of him for a reason, and insists she should not hold herself responsible for the failings of mankind. This relationship between Prometheus and Dora hints at something important. Despite his growing hatred for the gods, despite his bitterness and rage, Prometheus retained some capacity for connection, some ability to see individuals rather than just embodiments of divine cruelty. Dora, created specifically to punish humanity for accepting Prometheus's gifts, somehow became someone he cared about. Perhaps because she, like him, was a victim of Zeus's manipulations. Perhaps because she carried guilt for opening the jar and releasing evils into the world, much as Prometheus carried guilt for the suffering his defiance had caused. Whatever the reason, their connection demonstrates that beneath the hatred, beneath the desire for revenge, some part of the original Prometheus remained intact. But that part was buried deeper with each passing year, with each new story of divine cruelty he witnessed, with each reminder of his own suffering, physical and psychological. With each moment he caught sight of the scar across his torso and remembered what it had cost him to show compassion to mortals. The Olympians, for their part, seemed content to pretend Prometheus did not exist. He had been freed, yes, but only because his information about Thetis had been valuable. Beyond that, he was simply a reminder of an embarrassing episode, a Titan who should have known better than to defy Zeus. They did not seek him out. They did not offer apologies or reparations. They simply moved on, secure in their power, confident that the matter was settled. They should have known better. Prometheus's gift was foresight, after all. He could see what was coming, could perceive the shape of futures not yet born. And as the centuries passed and new visions began to come to him, he saw something that shocked him, even given his experience. Chronos, the Titan of time, cut into pieces and imprisoned in Tartarus, was healing. Time itself, patient and inexorable, was putting itself back together. And when it emerged, when Chronos rose again from the depths, he would bring with him a chance for vengeance against the Olympians who had overthrown and mutilated him. This vision crystallized everything for Prometheus. Here was the opportunity he had been waiting for, the moment when he could act on his convictions, strike back at the gods who had proven themselves unworthy of their power. Chronos would fail in the end. Prometheus's foresight showed him that much. The Second Titan War would end as the first had, with the Titans defeated. But that did not matter. What mattered was the opportunity to make the gods suffer, as they had made others suffer, to force them to experience fear and desperation, to show them that their rule was not inevitable, their power not absolute. Even if the war was lost, even if the ultimate outcome was the restoration of Olympian supremacy, Prometheus saw value in the struggle itself, because it would change things. It would force the gods to acknowledge their own vulnerability. It would create opportunities for something new to emerge from the chaos of divine conflict. And there was something else, something his foresight showed him that changed everything. A young goddess named Melinoë, sister to Zagreus, trained in secret by Hecate to challenge Chronos. She would be the key, the agent of change, as Prometheus would later call her. Through her journey, through the choices she made and the questions she asked, something fundamental could shift in how gods related to mortals, how power was wielded, how justice was understood. If Prometheus simply sat out the war, if he remained neutral and let events unfold without his participation, the outcome might be the same. Chronos defeated, Olympians restored. But nothing would change. The gods would learn nothing. Mortals would gain nothing. The cycle of divine cruelty would continue uninterrupted. But if Prometheus threw himself into the conflict, if he became a challenge Melinoë had to overcome, a voice questioning the justice of simply restoring the old order, then perhaps, just perhaps, something new could emerge. Perhaps the gods could be forced to be better. Perhaps mortals could gain a measure of protection. Perhaps the suffering he had endured could be given meaning by using it as motivation to change the system that had inflicted it. It was a long game, a gamble that would require him to appear as a villain, to fight against the very side that would ultimately win, to suffer defeat, knowing it was inevitable. But Prometheus had endured worse. He had survived millennia of daily torture. He could survive being the antagonist in someone else's story of heroism if it meant achieving something meaningful in the end. And so, when cultists of Chronos, primarily satyrs, who had remained loyal to the Titan of Time through all the centuries of his imprisonment, finally succeeded in resurrecting their master, when Chronos emerged from the depths of Tartarus and began his war against the Olympians, Prometheus made his choice. He would ally with Chronos. He would become the Titan's general, leading the assault on Mount Olympus itself. He would train Athos to fight at his side, turning the creature that had once tormented him into a weapon against the gods. He would use his knowledge of the Olympians' weaknesses, his understanding of their defensive strategies, his foresight to anticipate their countermoves. He would become what the gods feared most, a Titan who knew them intimately and had every reason to want them destroyed. And when Melinoë came, and she would come, his visions assured him of that. He would challenge her not just physically, but philosophically. He would force her to question whether restoring her father Hades and the Olympian order was truly justice, or simply the restoration of a comfortable tyranny. He would show her the gods' cruelties, remind her of the innocents who had suffered under divine rule, make her see that victory in war did not make the victors righteous. He would play the villain in her story, knowing that sometimes the antagonist's greatest service is not in winning, but in asking questions the protagonist needs to answer. This decision, this calculated choice to appear as a traitor to the very gods he had once helped, would define Prometheus's role in the Second Titan War. And it would lead him to become the guardian of Mount Olympus, the final obstacle before the gates to Zeus's palace, the fire-wreathed figure who would test Melinoë again and again until she was ready to face what lay beyond. The wound in Prometheus's flesh had healed, at least physically, but the wound in his spirit, the damage done by millennia of injustice, would never truly close. And from that wound, from that profound psychological trauma, would come a plan so audacious, so complex, so dependent on losing in order to win, that only a being with the gift of foresight could hope to execute it. The Firebringer was about to set a new blaze, one that would burn away not just the Olympians' complacency, but perhaps the very foundations of how gods and mortals related to one another. Whether that fire would illuminate a path to something better or simply leave the world in ashes remained to be seen. But Prometheus had learned one thing from his theft of fire, from his millennia of suffering, from his eventual liberation. Sometimes you must dare to burn the world in order to forge it anew. Part 7. Chronos returns. The Second Titan War begins deep beneath the earth, in the lowest pits of Tartarus, where even light cannot penetrate, where time moves strangely and reality bends under the weight of divine imprisonment. Something impossible was happening. Chronos, the Titan of Time, torn apart and scattered so that he could never reform, was healing. It should not have been possible. According to the lore established in both Hades games, the gods had been thorough in their dismemberment, using Chronos' own scythe to carve him into pieces, then scattering those fragments across the deepest reaches of Tartarus. Each piece was enchanted to remain separate, warded against reunion, sealed by Zeus's power and Hades' authority over the underworld. Chronos was not simply imprisoned. He was unmade, reduced from a being to a collection of component parts that could never become whole again. But the gods had forgotten something fundamental in their certainty. You cannot kill time itself. You can slow it, imprison it, scatter it across the cosmos, but you cannot make it cease. Time flows whether gods will it or not, patient and inexorable, always moving toward its appointed ends. And given enough time, given millennia upon millennia, even the impossible becomes merely improbable, then probable, then inevitable. The cultists helped, of course. The game reveals through environmental storytelling and NPC dialogue that satyrs, primarily beings who remembered Chronos' rule differently than the gods did, worked tirelessly to resurrect their former master. To them, the Titan's reign had brought order and certainty, a world that made sense even if it was harsh. The Olympians' rule, by contrast, felt chaotic and capricious, full of contradictions and sudden reversals. Zeus's lightning might strike anywhere for any reason. Poseidon's wrath could sink ships on a whim. Hades judged the dead, but often seemed to do so based on inscrutable criteria that changed from century to century. So the satyrs, and others who bore loyalty to the old order, began their work. They could not reach all of Chronos' pieces. Some were too deep, too well guarded, too thoroughly sealed. But they could reach enough. And slowly, piece by piece, they brought the fragments together, performing rituals and sacrifices, weakening the enchantments that kept the Titan Lord dismembered. It took generations. The cultists who began this work died before seeing its fruition, passing the task to their children, who passed it to their children's children, an unbroken chain of devotion stretching across centuries. They built temples in secret places, carved hourglasses into hidden stones, kept faith with a god who existed only as scattered fragments and fading memory. And finally, after so long that even the immortals had forgotten to worry about it, the impossible happened. Chronos reformed. Not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment, but gradually, methodically, time putting itself back together the way only time could. The fragments drew together, seeking one another across the void, drawn by some fundamental force that transcended enchantment or imprisonment. When Chronos first returned to consciousness, he was weak, diminished, a shadow of his former power. But he was whole, and he was free from Tartarus, pulled from the depths by his cultists' devotion and his own indomitable nature. He stood in the hidden temple where they had gathered his pieces, and he looked at the satyrs who had given their lives to restoring him, and he made them promises. Promises of vengeance against the Olympians who had torn him apart. Promises of restored glory, of a new golden age, of justice for the loyal servants who had kept faith through endless centuries. Promises that, whether true or not, gave those followers something to fight for, something to believe in beyond the capricious rule of Olympus. Chronos did not immediately strike at the gods. He was patient. Time itself is nothing if not patient, and he understood that direct confrontation but in his weakened state would be suicide. He needed to rebuild his power, gather allies, wait for the right moment when his enemies were vulnerable and his own forces were strong enough to ensure victory, or at least strong enough to shake Olympus's foundations thoroughly enough that the gods would never feel secure again. He began by consolidating power in the underworld. This was the domain of his eldest son, Hades, who ruled the dead with stern but generally just authority. Hades had drawn this lot after the Titanomachy, taking dominion over the realm below, while Zeus claimed the heavens and Poseidon the seas. It was not a role Hades had desired. Later dialogue in Hades 2 suggests he felt he had been maneuvered into it. But it was one he had accepted and performed with dedication for millennia. Chronos saw opportunity in the underworld. It was vast, complex, filled with countless souls and considerable resources. If he could conquer it, could seize control from Hades, he would have a base of operations from which to strike at Olympus, an army of the dead to supplement his living followers, and the satisfaction of claiming his son's domain as his first victory. The attack came suddenly, without warning, at a moment when Hades had just returned from performing his duties. His family was gathered: Persephone, his wife; Zagreus, his son; various servants and allies of the house of Hades. They had no reason to suspect danger. Chronos had been unmade, scattered, imprisoned forever. The Titan War was ancient history, a threat that had been dealt with long ago. But Chronos was thorough in his vengeance. He brought with him not just his cultists, but other forces he had gathered. Undead armies, beings who had grievances against the Olympian order, creatures that thrived in chaos and saw opportunity in divine conflict. And he had something even more valuable: the element of surprise. The gods had grown complacent in their long rule, secure in their victory, unprepared for a threat they believed they had already defeated. The house of Hades fell quickly. Chronos, despite his weakened state, was still time incarnate, capable of feats that even gods struggled to counter. He could slow opponents while speeding his own forces. He could age weapons until they crumbled. He could freeze moments and move through them at his leisure, while his enemies remained trapped in time's flow. Against such power, even Hades' considerable might was insufficient. Hades was imprisoned, chained and bound, made helpless but kept alive as both hostage and trophy. Persephone's fate remains unclear in the lore, captured perhaps, or hidden, or spirited away by allies who managed to escape Chronos' assault. Zagreus, the prince who had once fought his way out of the underworld to find his mother, was similarly captured, his location unknown. But one member of the House of Hades escaped: the infant Melinoë, sister to Zagreus, daughter of Hades and Persephone. Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft and the crossroads, managed to flee with the child, spiriting her away to a hidden realm where Chronos could not easily follow. This would prove to be the single greatest failure of Chronos' conquest, though he could not have known it at the time. That infant would grow into the agent of his downfall, trained and prepared specifically to challenge him. With the underworld conquered, with Hades imprisoned, and the flow of souls interrupted, Chronos turned his attention to the next phase of his plan: the assault on Mount Olympus itself. But here he faced a problem. The Olympians, alerted by Hades' fall, had barricaded themselves on their mountain. Their defenses were formidable, built and reinforced over centuries of rule. Zeus's lightning guarded the approaches. Athena's strategic genius organized the defenders. The various gods and their allies stood ready to repel any attack. Chronos needed someone who knew Olympus intimately, who understood its defenses and could counter them, who possessed both the tactical knowledge and the motivation to truly commit to bringing the gods down. He needed someone the gods had wronged deeply enough that vengeance would override any lingering loyalty. He needed someone whose very presence leading the assault would demoralize the defenders and demonstrate that the Olympians' cruelty had consequences. He needed Prometheus. The Titan of Foresight had already seen this moment coming, of course. His visions had shown him Chronos' resurrection, his own role in the coming war, the ultimate outcome, and the journey it would require. When Chronos' emissaries found him, when they made their offer of alliance and revenge, Prometheus did not hesitate. He agreed to serve as Chronos' general, to lead the assault on Mount Olympus, to use his knowledge of the gods against them. The Olympians, when they learned of Prometheus's betrayal, were shocked. Even Athena, goddess of wisdom who had once given Prometheus the gift of reason to bestow upon humanity, seemed hurt by this choice. She had considered him a friend, or at least a kindred spirit, someone who shared her love of knowledge and careful thought. His decision to fight against her felt personal in a way that Chronos' vengeance did not. But Athena, being wise, also understood. She acknowledged to Melinoë later that Prometheus's vengeance was warranted, that Zeus's punishment had been excessive, that the Titan had legitimate grievances against the Olympians. Understanding something, however, does not make it less painful. And understanding why Prometheus fought against her did not make Athena any less determined to defeat him. The siege of Mount Olympus began in earnest. Chronos remained in the underworld, consolidating his control, manipulating time to ensure the undead army could fight endlessly without rest. But Prometheus led the assault on the surface, commanding forces that swept across the world toward the gods' stronghold. Satyrs made up the bulk of his army, their loyalty to Chronos translated into fierce devotion to the Titan's cause. But there were others as well, beings who had been wronged by the gods, creatures who thrived in conflict, opportunists who saw a chance to claim power in the chaos. And there were the notable allies, beings whose presence lent legitimacy to Chronos' war, even if their motivations were complex. Polyphemus the Cyclops, angry at Poseidon for lying about being his father, fought for the Titan side. Eris, goddess of strife and discord, saw opportunity for chaos and threw her support behind Chronos, though she likely served no one but herself, using the war as excuse to indulge her nature. And there was Heracles, the demigod hero, son of Zeus himself, who should have been the Olympians' greatest champion, but who instead honored his oath to Prometheus and fought alongside the Titan against his own father. This betrayal, when it was finally revealed, struck deeper than any physical blow could have. Zeus had loved Heracles, had elevated him to Olympus after his death, had given him a place among the gods as reward for his heroic deeds. And yet the hero chose his debt to Prometheus over his duty to Zeus. The war raged for years. How many, it is difficult to say, for time became strange with Chronos' power affecting the battlefield. The Olympians fought desperately, holding their mountain against overwhelming odds. But they were on the defensive, reactive rather than proactive, unable to launch effective counterattacks while simultaneously defending their stronghold. The undead armies were relentless, rising again even when struck down. The living forces rotated, fresh troops always available while the gods' defenders grew weary from endless battle. And through it all, Prometheus commanded from the front lines, his knowledge of Olympian tactics allowing him to counter their strategies, his foresight letting him anticipate their moves, his determination driving the assault forward even when victory seemed impossible. He stood as the final guardian before the gates to the palace of Zeus itself, a living challenge to any who would try to reach the king of the gods. But Prometheus knew something the others did not, something his foresight had shown him. This war could not be won by force alone. Chronos' victory was not inevitable. Indeed, it was impossible. The tide would turn. The Olympians would find a way to resist. And at the center of that resistance would be a young goddess, trained in secret, who would challenge everything Chronos and Prometheus had built. Melinoë was coming. The agent of change was on her way. And when she arrived, the true purpose of Prometheus's gambit would begin to unfold. Part 8. Guardian of Olympus, Fire as Philosophy. Imagine standing before the gates to the palace of Zeus, the culmination of a journey through hell itself, through the underworld and up the slopes of Mount Olympus, fighting past undead armies and divine defenders. And there, blocking the final threshold, stands a figure wreathed in flame. This is how Melinoë encounters Prometheus for the first time. As an obstacle, an enemy, a titan who has inexplicably chosen to fight for Chronos against the gods. She does not yet understand his motivations. She sees only betrayal, only another threat to overcome in her quest to defeat Chronos and restore her family. Prometheus, for his part, sees exactly what he expected to see. The young goddess his foresight had shown him, the agent of change who will reshape the conflict and perhaps the very nature of divine rule itself. He has been waiting for her, preparing for this confrontation, knowing that she must defeat him repeatedly to grow strong enough for what lies beyond. The battle begins. Prometheus's combat style in Hades 2 is distinctive, deliberately designed to embody his nature as the Titan of Foresight. He does not simply attack randomly or rely on brute force. Instead, he telegraphs his attacks, showing Melinoë exactly where they will land before executing them. This might seem like a disadvantage, giving the opponent time to react, but it serves a deeper purpose. It forces Melinoë to pay attention, to observe patterns, to think ahead rather than simply reacting in the moment. The flame strike attack exemplifies this perfectly. Prometheus leaps out of the arena, the camera zooms out, and indicators appear showing exactly where massive waves of fire will sweep across the battlefield. 3 patterns at first, then 5 as the battle progresses. Melinoë must memorize the sequence, must understand the pattern, must think multiple steps ahead to survive. It is a lesson disguised as an attack. Foresight is survival. Understanding is power. Those who cannot see what comes next will be consumed by the flames. His other attacks similarly demonstrate this philosophy. The Nova Strike creates a shockwave around him, warning Melinoë to maintain distance or suffer the consequences. The Screw Upper launches a flaming tornado that persists, teaching her about hazards that linger beyond the initial attack. The Barrage sends fireballs with tracking properties, forcing her to stay mobile, to never grow complacent. And the Eruption displays its area of effect before discharging, giving fair warning, while still remaining dangerous to those too slow or distracted to avoid it. Everything about his combat style says, "I am showing you what will happen. The knowledge is yours. What you do with it determines your survival." And throughout the battle, Prometheus speaks, not with mockery or casual cruelty like some bosses might, but with measured observations about Melinoë, about her journey, about her purpose in this war. He calls her the agent of change, acknowledging that her role is larger than she yet understands. He speaks of futures he has foreseen, outcomes he knows are inevitable, expressing neither joy nor despair at his own certain defeat, but simply accepting it as fact. "Where you're going, change follows," he tells her during one encounter. And change does not come without conflict. These words are significant. Prometheus is not fighting to win. He knows he will lose. He is fighting to test Melinoë, to strengthen her, to force her to confront questions she would rather avoid. Each defeat she suffers teaches her something new. Each victory she achieves makes her more capable. He is serving as her whetstone, sharpening her edge so that she can cut through what lies beyond him. But there is more to their encounters than just physical combat and philosophical lessons. Prometheus challenges Melinoë's assumptions about the war itself, about whether simply defeating Chronos and restoring the old order actually serves justice. In their conversations between battles, Prometheus points out the gods' cruelties toward mortals. He reminds her of Arachne, transformed into a spider for beating Athena in a weaving contest. He speaks of the countless humans who have suffered under divine whim, used as pawns in godly disputes, punished for crimes they could not control. He questions whether beings capable of such casual cruelty deserve to be restored to power, whether victory in ancient war justifies eternal rule. Melinoë, raised by Hecate and trained specifically to defeat Chronos and save her family, initially dismisses these arguments. She defends the gods, insists that they are necessary for order, argues that whatever flaws the Olympians possess, they are better than Chronos' tyranny. She sees Prometheus's points as distractions, attempts to slow her down or sway her from her mission. But she cannot ignore them entirely. The seed of doubt has been planted, the questions raised cannot be easily dismissed. And as she ascends Mount Olympus, as she witnesses more of the conflict and interacts with various characters, those seeds begin to grow. She starts to see the complexities that Prometheus was highlighting, the moral ambiguities that simple narrative of good gods versus evil Titan does not address. This is precisely what Prometheus intended. He is not trying to convert Melinoë to Chronos' cause. He knows that is impossible and likely undesirable. He is trying to make her question, to think, to see beyond the simple story she was told. Because when she finally defeats Chronos, when the moment comes to restore the old order, those questions will matter. They will influence how she uses her victory, what she demands from the gods in exchange for saving them, what changes she insists upon as price for restoration. Prometheus is playing an incredibly complex game here, operating on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface level, he serves as Chronos' general, leading the assault on Olympus, acting as the Titan's most effective weapon. On a deeper level, he serves as Melinoë's teacher, forcing her to grow stronger and wiser through repeated challenges. And on the deepest level, he is working toward a future only he can see, one where the cycle of divine cruelty might finally be broken, not through conquest, but through transformation. And there is Ethos, his eagle companion, fighting alongside him in these battles. The creature that once tormented him now serves him loyally, attacking Melinoë independently, creating additional hazards that she must account for while also fighting Prometheus himself. This transformation of tormentor into ally serves as visible metaphor for Prometheus's larger philosophy. Suffering can be transcended, relationships can change, what once was enemy might become companion if circumstances shift sufficiently. Yet Aetos cannot be killed or permanently defeated in these fights. The eagle withdraws when damaged, retreats and returns, unkillable. Perhaps this represents the persistence of trauma, the way that suffering cannot be entirely eliminated, but must be managed, controlled, transformed into something that serves rather than destroys. Prometheus has not escaped his torment. He has merely changed his relationship to it. As the battles continue, as Melinoë defeats Prometheus repeatedly and grows stronger with each victory, something begins to shift in their dynamic. Melinoë starts to see him not just as obstacle, but as person, as being with legitimate grievances and complex motivations. She realizes that he is not simply evil or traitorous, but rather operating according to logic that, while she disagrees with it, at least makes internal sense. Prometheus, for his part, watches her grow and sees his foresight proven correct. She is becoming what he knew she would become. Strong enough to challenge Chronos, wise enough to question simple narratives, capable enough to potentially change the fundamental dynamics between gods and mortals. Each time she stands back up after he defeats her, each time she adapts her strategy and tries again, she proves that she is indeed the agent of change he has been waiting for. And then Heracles enters the picture when Melinoë activates the Vow of Rivals at Tier 3, making her challenge even more difficult. The appearance of Zeus's own son fighting alongside Prometheus against Melinoë shocks her. She demands to know why Heracles would betray his father, why the greatest of heroes would side with the Titans against Olympus. The answer is complicated. Heracles explains, though not in detail, that he feels obligated to Prometheus due to their shared history, the oath between them, the debt he owes to the Titan who provided information that eventually led to his freedom from the 12 labors. Prometheus knew Heracles would respond to this call, knew that the hero's sense of honor would compel him to fight even against his own interests and family. This reveals something crucial about Prometheus's character, even in his current state. He inspires loyalty not through force or manipulation, but through genuine bonds, forged in shared suffering and mutual respect. Heracles could refuse. Zeus would welcome him back. The hero gains nothing material from fighting for the losing side, but he feels he owes Prometheus something, and that debt matters more to him than political expedience or familial duty. The combined fight against Prometheus and Heracles becomes one of the most challenging encounters in Hades 2, mechanically difficult, but also narratively significant. Melinoë must overcome not just the Titan who sees the future, but also the hero who embodies divine strength, must prove herself capable of defeating the very best that Chronos' forces can field. And in overcoming this challenge, she demonstrates that she is ready for what comes next. After enough defeats, after Melinoë has proven herself time and again, Prometheus's dialogue begins to shift subtly. He acknowledges her growth, recognizes her increasing capacity, starts to speak as though he sees a future where she succeeds. Not because he wants Chronos to lose, or perhaps not only for that reason, but because he has always known this outcome was inevitable, and he is satisfied that the pieces are falling into place as his foresight predicted. He speaks of the fates, those mysterious beings who weave destiny itself, mentioning that they hold keys to stopping Chronos. This is crucial information, provided to Melinoë specifically, because Prometheus knows she needs it, because his role as teacher extends beyond combat to strategic intelligence. He is, in a very real sense, working against his own ostensible master by giving Chronos' enemy vital information. But that is not betrayal in Prometheus's mind. That is simply fulfilling his actual purpose, the one he has been working toward since he first allied with Chronos. He is not fighting to make Chronos win. He never was. He is fighting to create the conditions where Chronos' defeat will lead to actual change rather than simple restoration of the status quo. This is the deepest level of Prometheus' strategy, the true game he has been playing all along. By standing with Chronos, by leading the assault on Olympus, by becoming the god's enemy, he forces the situation to a crisis point where the old order cannot simply be restored by defeating Chronos. Too much has been revealed. Too many wounds have been opened. Too many questions have been raised. When Melinoë finally wins, and she will win, Prometheus has always known this. The victory will be hollow unless she demands accountability, insists on changes, refuses to simply hand power back to the very gods who created the conditions that led to this war. The guardian of Mount Olympus serves his purpose not by keeping Melinoë out, but by ensuring that when she finally passes through, she is ready to demand more than just her family's freedom. She must be ready to demand justice, reform, acknowledgement of the gods' failings, protection for mortals, consequences for divine cruelty. These are the changes Prometheus fights for, even though he does so while appearing to fight for the opposite. And as Melinoë finally proves herself capable, as she defeats Prometheus definitively enough times that his role as gatekeeper is complete, he allows her to pass. Not with bitterness or regret, but with something approaching satisfaction. She is ready. She will do what needs to be done. And whatever happens next, whatever future unfolds from this moment, it will be different from the endless cycle of tyranny replacing tyranny that has defined divine rule since the Titanomachy. The Firebringer has set his final blaze, and it burns with the light of transformation rather than mere destruction. Whether that light will illuminate a path to something better, or whether it will consume everything and leave only ashes, remains to be seen. But at least something will change. At least the sacrifice will have meaning. At least the suffering, his own and others, will not have been entirely in vain. Part 9. The Revelations. Truths that transform. As Melinoë progresses beyond Prometheus, as she fights her way deeper into the conflict and closer to Chronos himself, revelations begin to unfold that recontextualize everything she thought she understood about the war. These truths are not given to her all at once in convenient exposition, but rather emerge gradually through conversations, through observations, through the careful attention to detail that Supergiant Games is known for in their narrative design. She learns more about the gods' treatment of mortals, not from Prometheus's philosophical arguments, but from encountering the victims themselves. Arachne, transformed into a spider and banished to the shadows, speaks of her resentment toward Athena and all the Olympians who stood by and did nothing while she was punished for the crime of talent. Odysseus, the legendary hero, is tormented by Poseidon's curse, even in death, suffering endless separation from his family as punishment for blinding Polyphemus, the same Cyclops now fighting for Chronos, who has his own grievances against Poseidon's lies and abandonment. These are not abstract concepts or theoretical injustices. They are people, or at least beings who were once people, whose lives have been destroyed by divine whim. And as Melinoë interacts with them, as she witnesses their suffering and hears their stories, Prometheus's questions begin to resonate differently. Is she really fighting to restore the rule of beings who do this to mortals? Is victory that simply returns the old order truly justice? But there are counter-arguments as well. Chronos' rule, though he calls it a golden age, is revealed to be equally problematic in different ways. Aphrodite mentions finding his previous reign overall boring, suggesting that his order came at the cost of freedom and spontaneity. The undead armies he commands are not volunteers, but conscripts, souls forced to fight regardless of their own wishes. And Chronos himself, for all his rhetoric about justice and renewal, shows little actual concern for mortal welfare. He simply uses resentment toward the gods as a recruiting tool while pursuing his own agenda of vengeance and restored supremacy. Melinoë finds herself caught between two flawed sides, forced to acknowledge that neither option is perfect, that choosing the lesser evil is still choosing evil. This moral complexity is what Prometheus wanted her to confront, the nuance he knew she needed to understand if she was going to make decisions that actually improved the world rather than simply maintained it. And then comes the revelation about Prometheus's deeper motivations, pieced together from conversations with various characters and from Prometheus's own cryptic statements. Athena admits that Prometheus's vengeance is warranted, that Zeus's punishment was excessive, that the Titan has legitimate grievances. Other Olympians, when pressed, acknowledge that the gods have not always been just in their dealings with mortals or even with one another. The moral high ground, they claim, is shakier than they would like to admit. More importantly, Melinoë begins to understand that Prometheus is not actually fighting for Chronos' victory. His actions, viewed through the lens of this new understanding, make more sense as those of a teacher than a conqueror. He has been testing her, preparing her, forcing her to become strong enough and wise enough to actually change things rather than simply defeating Chronos and restoring the status quo. This realization transforms her perception of the entire conflict. She is not just fighting to save her family, though that remains important. She is not just opposing Chronos to restore divine order, though that too remains a goal. She is fighting to prove that change is possible, that the cycle of tyranny can be broken, that there is a path forward that does not simply replace one terrible rule with another slightly less terrible rule. The fates become crucial in this phase of the story. Prometheus had mentioned them, and now their absence becomes a driving mystery. Where are the Moirai, the weavers of destiny? Why have they not intervened in this cosmic conflict? How can Chronos be stopped without their involvement? The quest to find the fates, which becomes a major post-game objective, requires Melinoë to deepen her relationships with various characters who have connections to destiny and fate. She must bond with Moros, Doom incarnate, who serves as the fate's emissary. She must connect with Chaos, the primordial force from which all things emerged. She must even repeatedly face and defeat Prometheus until he finally speaks of the fates in his battle dialogue, acknowledging their importance and pointing her toward the truth of their disappearance. This is part of Prometheus's plan as well. He knows the fates are key to truly stopping Chronos, but he also knows that Melinoë must be ready to find them, to hear what they have to say, to understand the implications of their prophecies. So he gives her the clues she needs, but only when she is strong enough to use them properly. The revelation of Heracles' involvement adds another layer of complexity. When Melinoë discovers that the greatest of heroes has been fighting alongside Prometheus, when she learns about the oath between them and the debt Heracles feels he owes, it forces her to reconsider simplistic narratives about loyalty and betrayal. Heracles is not evil. He is not even wrong, necessarily. He is simply honoring a commitment he made, fulfilling an obligation to someone who helped him when he needed it most. This demonstrates something crucial. The war is not divided into good and evil sides, but rather into groups of people and beings with complicated motivations and legitimate grievances making difficult choices in impossible situations. Some, like Chronos, are clearly more in the wrong than others, but few are entirely pure or entirely corrupt. Melinoë also learns more about Prometheus's relationship with Pandora, Dora in Hades too. Their connection, never fully explained but hinted at through dialogue, suggests that Prometheus retained some capacity for care and relationship even after his torture and transformation. He protected Dora's memories somehow, or at least is connected to their loss, and he expresses concern for her even while fighting against the side she has aligned with. This humanizes him in Melinoë's eyes. He is not simply a force of vengeance or a philosophical abstraction. He is a person, or at least was once, before the chains and the eagle reshaped him, who cared about others, who formed relationships, who felt love and protectiveness. Understanding this makes it harder to see him as pure antagonist, easier to see him as tragic figure whose suffering drove him to terrible choices, even as it did not entirely destroy his capacity for connection. As these revelations accumulate, as Melinoë's understanding deepens, she begins to approach the endgame with different mindset than she had at the beginning. She is no longer simply the hero defeating the villain. She is an agent of potential change, positioned between multiple flawed factions, with the opportunity to demand something better than what came before. This is exactly what Prometheus foresaw. This is exactly why he fought on Chronos' side, despite knowing it was the losing side. This is why he challenged Melinoë again and again, why he asked her uncomfortable questions, why he forced her to see the complexity beneath simple narratives of divine justice. Because when she finally faces Chronos, when she stands ready to deliver the final blow that will end the Second Titan War, she will do so not as naive child restoring the old order unquestioningly, but as someone who understands the costs and consequences of that restoration, someone who might demand accountability as price for victory, someone who could potentially transform divine rule rather than simply reinforcing it. Whether she will actually succeed in demanding such change, whether the gods will agree to reform their behavior, whether anything will actually improve for mortals in the aftermath of the war, these questions remain open. The game's ending, while providing some closure, also leaves much ambiguous and subject to interpretation. But the possibility of change exists in a way it did not before, and that possibility is Prometheus's true gift to the world, the final act of defiance that might prove more powerful than the theft of fire ever was. Part 10. Chronos Falls, Inevitable Endings. The confrontation with Chronos, when it finally comes, reveals the Titan of Time as both more and less than he appeared throughout the war. He is powerful, certainly, capable of temporal manipulations that make him one of the most difficult bosses in Hades too. But he is also, in a way, trapped by his own nature. He is time itself, and time marches inevitably toward its appointed ends. He can see this as well as Prometheus can, yet unlike Prometheus, he fights against the inevitable rather than working with it. Melinoë, armed with knowledge gained from the Fates, powered by boons from the Olympian gods who have finally united in common cause, strengthened by her countless battles, including those against Prometheus, faces Chronos in the depths of Tartarus where his power is greatest. The battle is epic, cinematically impressive, mechanically challenging. Time itself becomes weapon and hazard as Chronos manipulates the flow of moments, ages. Melinoë's weapons, rewinds his own wounds, attempts to undo her very existence. But she prevails. Through skill, through persistence, through the accumulation of everything she has learned on her journey, Melinoë defeats Chronos. The Titan of Time, cut into pieces once before, faces dismemberment again. The Second Titan War ends as the first did, with the Titans defeated and the Olympians victorious. But then comes the unexpected twist, the moment that validates everything Prometheus worked toward. Melinoë shows mercy. She does not kill Chronos, does not dismember him, does not condemn him to renewed torture. Instead, she offers him a choice: surrender voluntarily, release her family, and acknowledge defeat. Accept punishment from the gods he wronged, but know that she speaks for mitigation, for justice tempered with mercy. And Chronos, confronted not with brutality but with generosity, not with vengeance but with offer of better ending, accepts. This is revolutionary in the context of Greek mythology, and even in the context of Hades's world. The cycle of vengeance, Chronos overthrown by Zeus, Zeus overthrowing Chronos in turn, endless violence begetting more violence, is finally broken. Melinoë proves that there is another way, that victory does not require cruelty, that even the worst enemy can be offered chance at redemption. And Chronos changes. The being who fought mercilessly throughout the war, who imprisoned Hades and besieged Olympus, who seemed irredeemable in his anger and thirst for vengeance, becomes something else when shown mercy. He voluntarily releases Melinoë's family from imprisonment. He withdraws his forces. He even becomes helpful afterward, participating in the life of the crossroads, contributing to the community rather than seeking to destroy it. This transformation is not complete or perfect. Chronos remains dangerous, his power immense, his nature fundamentally tied to time's inexorable flow. But it demonstrates that even those who seem utterly corrupted by anger and pain can change when offered alternatives to endless conflict. And Prometheus witnesses this outcome, sees his foresight validated, watches as the young goddess he challenged and tested and prepared becomes the catalyst for genuine change in divine relations. Whether he feels satisfaction or vindication, or simply acknowledgement that events unfolded as he knew they would, we cannot say for certain. But his gambit succeeded. The cycle is broken, at least potentially. The future is open to possibilities that were foreclosed before. The Olympian gods, freed from siege and restored to their mountain, are faced with uncomfortable truths about their own conduct. They have been saved by Melinoë, yes, but that salvation came with implicit demand for accountability. She knows what they have done. She has heard from their victims. She has seen the consequences of their cruelty. And while she chose to save them, that choice does not absolve them of responsibility for past actions. Some of the gods respond better than others to this reckoning. Athena, always wise, acknowledges the justice of Prometheus's grievances and seems genuinely interested in doing better. Others remain more resistant, less willing to admit fault, more inclined to see their restoration as validation rather than reprieve. But the conversation has been opened, the questions have been asked, and they cannot be easily dismissed or forgotten. In the post-game epilogue, there are hints that the gods do begin treating mortals better. The shift is subtle, not a complete transformation of divine nature overnight, but a genuine improvement in how power is wielded and how justice is administered. Mortals gain some measure of protection they lacked before. The casual cruelties that characterized divine rule become less common, or at least less publicly acceptable. Whether this improvement is permanent or temporary, whether it represents fundamental change or merely a brief period of good behavior before old patterns reassert themselves, remains to be seen. But for now, in this moment, things are better than they were. And that improvement, however modest, is directly attributable to the chain of events that Prometheus set in motion by allying with Chronos, by challenging Melinoë, by forcing everyone involved to confront uncomfortable truths about justice and power and responsibility. As for Prometheus himself, his fate in the aftermath is complex. He fought against the Olympians, led armies against them, served as Chronos' general in war that killed countless beings and nearly succeeded in overthrowing divine order entirely. By any reasonable standard, he should face severe punishment for these crimes. But Melinoë, having learned mercy from her confrontation with Chronos, extends that mercy to Prometheus as well. She understands his motivations now, sees the method in his apparent madness, recognizes that he was working toward change rather than simple vengeance. She speaks on his behalf to the Olympians, arguing that his punishment has already been excessive, that further cruelty would simply perpetuate the cycle she has worked to break. Zeus, faced with his daughter's plea and aware of his own past injustice toward Prometheus, relents. The Titan is not imprisoned or tortured anew. He is allowed his freedom, permitted to exist without constant fear of divine retribution. The ring he wears, forged from the stone and chain of his previous imprisonment, remains as reminder but not as ongoing punishment. This is not full absolution. Prometheus's actions in the Second Titan War cannot be entirely overlooked. But it is acceptance that punishment can end, that mercy can be extended even to those who fought against you, that cycles of vengeance can be broken if people are willing to make different choices. And in this outcome, in this ending that is both resolution and beginning, we see the culmination of Prometheus's arc from benefactor to victim to villain to something more complex than any of those labels capture. He is the fire-bringer still, but the fire he brought this time was not literal flame for cooking and warmth. It was the fire of transformation, the burning away of old certainties, the light that illuminates paths previously unseen. Part 11. The Fates Revealed. Destiny's Hand. In the true ending of Hades 2, accessible only after completing numerous post-game requirements and deepening bonds with key characters, Melinoë finally locates the three Fates. These beings, Clotho who spins the thread of life, Lachesis who measures it, and Atropos who cuts it, have been missing since Chronos' rise, thrown into the depths by the Titan of Time, who feared their power to see and shape destiny. Their revelation casts everything that came before in new light. The Fates explain that they had foreseen Chronos' return, had known that the Second Titan War was inevitable, had even seen its outcome. And crucially, they had seen Prometheus' role in all of it, understood that his apparent betrayal was actually part of pattern too complex to discern without their perspective. The Fates, being weavers of destiny itself, recognize that Prometheus was working with them rather than against them, following threads they had laid, even if he could not see the full pattern. His foresight, formidable as it is, sees futures but not the grand design. He knew what would happen, but not necessarily why it had to happen that way. The Fates, with their higher vantage point, saw both. They revealed to Melinoë that Prometheus's alliance with Chronos served multiple purposes in the grand design of fate. First, it forced the crisis that would otherwise have been avoided, pushed divine conflict to a point where resolution required fundamental change rather than simple restoration. Second, it positioned Prometheus himself to serve as Melinoë's teacher, to challenge and test her in ways that prepared her for the role she needed to play. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it demonstrated that even those who seem irredeemable, who have committed terrible acts in pursuit of vengeance, can be part of positive transformation if their actions are understood in proper context. This does not excuse Prometheus's actions exactly. The beings who died in the war are still dead. The suffering caused by the siege was real and terrible. The trauma inflicted on countless innocents cannot be undone simply by revealing that it served larger purpose. But it does provide context that complicates simple judgments about his guilt or responsibility. The Fates also address directly the question of free will versus destiny, acknowledging the paradox of their own existence. They weave fate, yet beings make choices. They see futures, yet those futures can change based on decisions made. Prometheus's foresight similarly shows him probable outcomes, not fixed certainties. He chose his path based on what he saw, but his seeing influenced his choice, which influenced the outcome, in a recursive loop that even the Fates struggle to fully articulate. What they make clear, however, is that Prometheus acted according to his nature and in response to his experiences. A being who had not endured millennia of torture would not have made the same choices. A Titan who had not witnessed endless divine cruelty would not have felt the same compulsion to force change. His actions were shaped by his suffering, and his suffering was shaped by Zeus's cruelty, and Zeus's cruelty was shaped by his fear of overthrow, and so on back through the chain of causation until it becomes impossible to assign simple blame or praise. This is the deepest level of understanding that Hades II's narrative offers, that stories of heroes and villains are inadequate to capture the complexity of real moral situations, that everyone is acting based on their own understanding and experiences. That judgment must account for context, even while not absolving individuals of responsibility for their choices. And the Fates, having explained all this, having revealed the pattern they have been weaving, abdicate. They step back from their role as determiners of destiny, acknowledging that perhaps mortals and gods and titans deserve the chance to shape their own futures without divine threads pulling them in predetermined directions. This abdication is itself part of their pattern, a final act of weaving that unravels the loom itself. This is what Prometheus fought for, though he may not have known it explicitly. Not just mercy for himself, not just vengeance against the gods, but fundamental restructuring of how destiny and choice interact. The Fates stepping back means that futures are more open than they have been since the beginning of time. Mortals gain agency they previously lacked. Even gods find themselves less constrained by prophecy and fate. The future becomes canvas waiting to be painted rather than tapestry already woven. And here, finally, we can return to that question we raised earlier. Remember, the contradiction that didn't make sense? Prometheus told everyone he foresaw Chronos winning. That's supposedly why he allied with the Titan of Time, backing what he believed would be the winning side. But he also explicitly, repeatedly tells Melinoë that he knows she will defeat him eventually, that his own defeat is inevitable. Now, with the Fates revelation, we can see what was really happening. Prometheus's foresight shows him probable futures, not certainties. Multiple timelines, branching possibilities. And what he actually saw when he looked at the Second Titan War wasn't Chronos' victory. Not really. Not as a fixed outcome. What he saw was this. If he did nothing, if he stayed neutral or even opposed Chronos, the Titan would be defeated, yes, but the Olympians would learn nothing. They would restore their rule unchanged, continue treating mortals with the same casual cruelty, maintain the same corrupt system that led to the war in the first place. The cycle would continue just as it had for millennia. But if he joined Chronos, if he became the god's enemy, if he forced Melinoë to confront uncomfortable truths about divine justice, if he created a crisis so profound that simple restoration became impossible, then maybe, just maybe, something could change. The futures where he fought for Chronos led to his defeat, yes, but they also led to the possibility of transformation, of mercy instead of vengeance, of the Fates themselves stepping back, of a world fundamentally altered. He lied to Chronos about seeing his victory because he needed the Titan to trust him, to give him command of the siege, to position him exactly where he needed to be to challenge Melinoë at the crucial moment. And he told Melinoë the truth, that he foresaw his own defeat, because she needed to understand that he wasn't actually trying to stop her. He was trying to forge her into someone capable of demanding more than mere victory. It was all a gambit, from the beginning. A calculated risk by someone who could see just far enough into the future to know what needed to happen, but not so far that he could guarantee the outcome. He bet everything, his reputation, his life, the lives of countless others, on the possibility that forcing a crisis would lead to lasting change rather than mere restoration of tyranny. And from what we can see in the game's ending, Chronos shown mercy, the gods treating mortals better, the Fates stepping back, it worked. The gambit paid off. The long game succeeded. But it cost him everything. His allies, his reputation, any chance of simple redemption or peace. He'll be remembered, by many, as the traitor who fought for Chronos. The historical narrative won't capture the full complexity of what he was really doing. And Prometheus, who can see the future, knew that too. He knew what this would cost him personally, and he chose to pay that price anyway, because some fires burn the one who carries them most of all. And Prometheus, seeing this outcome, seeing that his sacrifices and suffering and complex maneuvering have led to this moment of genuine liberation, finally allows himself something approaching peace. Not happiness necessarily. The scars run too deep for simple joy, but satisfaction that his existence has mattered, that his pain served purpose, that the fire he brought this time will burn longer and brighter than any physical flame. Part 12. Closing. The fire that remains. So we come to the end of Prometheus's story. Though of course for an immortal, endings are always temporary and provisional. He survives the Second Titan War. He witnesses Melinoë's mercy toward Chronos and the transformation that follows. He sees the Olympian gods begin, however tentatively, to treat mortals with more consideration and less casual cruelty. He experiences the Fates' abdication and the opening of futures that were previously foreclosed. And he remains in the world, bearing his scar, wearing his ring, accompanied by Aetos, who has transformed from tormentor to companion. He is not restored to his former position of trust among the Olympians. Too much has happened for that. But neither is he imprisoned or punished further. He exists in an ambiguous space, neither fully redeemed nor entirely condemned, recognized as both victim and perpetrator of terrible acts. This ambiguity is appropriate for a figure who defies simple categorization. Prometheus in Hades 2 is not simply the noble benefactor of humanity from classical mythology, nor is he simply villain who betrayed the gods for vengeance. He is something more complex, a being shaped by suffering into instrument of change, who saw far enough into the future to understand that sometimes you must appear to fight for the losing side in order to shift the conditions of victory itself. His story asks uncomfortable questions about justice and vengeance, about whether extreme suffering justifies extreme responses, about whether the ends can justify the means when the means involve considerable death and destruction. It does not provide easy answers to these questions because easy answers do not exist. Instead, it invites us to sit with the complexity, to hold multiple truths simultaneously, to acknowledge that both Prometheus was wronged terribly and his vengeance is understandable, and Prometheus caused immense suffering to innocents in pursuit of his goals, can be true at the same time. The title of this exploration asked why the Firebringer betrayed Olympus. We now understand that betrayal is too simple a word for what Prometheus did. He did not betray the Olympians so much as force them to face themselves, to acknowledge their own capacity for cruelty, to confront the consequences of their actions. He did not fight for Chronos' victory so much as use Chronos' war as tool to create space for transformation. He betrayed, if we must use that word, the comfortable lie that the Olympian gods were unambiguously good and deserving of unquestioned rule. He betrayed the narrative that Zeus's punishment of him was just and right and necessary. He betrayed the assumption that mortals should be grateful for whatever scraps of consideration divine beings deigned to give them. And in doing so, in committing these betrayals, he gave humanity and gods alike the opportunity to build something better. Whether they will take that opportunity remains to be seen. Whether the improvements in divine behavior will last or fade back into old patterns is uncertain. Whether Prometheus's sacrifices will ultimately matter in the vast sweep of eternal time cannot yet be known. But for now, in this moment, something has changed. The fire that Prometheus brought millennia ago gave humanity the ability to survive and thrive in a hostile world. The fire he brought in the Second Titan War, the burning away of comfortable lies, the illumination of uncomfortable truths, gives everyone the opportunity to build a more just world. Whether they do so is up to them. And Prometheus, the Titan of Foresight, watches the futures unfold, seeing probable paths branch and diverge, understanding that his role as catalyst is complete. He can rest now, as much as any immortal ever rests. He can bear his scar with the knowledge that it represents not just suffering, but transformation. He can wear his ring not as mark of shame, but as reminder that even the most terrible punishment can be endured, transcended, transformed into motivation for positive change. The eagle, Aetos, perches on his shoulder, no longer instrument of torment, but symbol of survival and adaptation. Together they look toward future that is more open, more uncertain, more full of possibility than any that came before. This is Prometheus's legacy in Hades chapter 2. Not the gift of fire for warmth and cooking, but the gift of fire as transformation, as challenge to power, as light that exposes what was hidden in shadow. He forced the gods to see themselves clearly. He demanded that mortals be seen as worthy of consideration. He showed Melinoë that mercy and justice are not contradictions but necessities if cycles of vengeance are to be broken. And if he paid terrible price for these gifts, if his own suffering was immense and his methods questionable, if the path he chose led through war and death and destruction, well, Prometheus has always understood that fire burns. It destroys even as it purifies. It hurts even as it illuminates. The question is never whether fire will cause pain, but whether the warmth and light it provides justify the burns. Prometheus looked at the state of divine rule, saw the endless cycle of cruelty and vengeance, observed gods who learned nothing from their own victory over the Titans, and decided that the world needed burning, not to destroy it, but to forge it anew, not to end divine rule, but to transform it into something that might actually deserve the power it wielded. Whether he succeeded is a question each observer must answer for themselves. But he tried. Despite everything that was done to him, despite millennia of torture and the trauma it inflicted, despite having every reason to simply withdraw from divine conflicts and seek peace in isolation, Prometheus tried to make things better. Not just for himself, but for mortals everywhere who suffered under careless divine rule. That is why he betrayed Olympus, not for revenge, though revenge was part of it, not for Chronos' victory, though he fought on Chronos' side, not even primarily for his own vindication, though that too played a role. He betrayed Olympus because Olympus, as it was, deserved betrayal. Because the gods, as they were, needed to be challenged. Because the system, as it operated, required disruption if it was ever to improve. And now, in the aftermath, as peace settles over a world exhausted by war, as gods and mortals alike begin the difficult work of building something better from the ruins of the old order, Prometheus's fire continues to burn. It burns in the questions that cannot be unasked. It burns in the reforms that cannot be unreformed. It burns in the memory of mercy shown to those who seemed beyond redemption. The Firebringer gave humanity fire once, long ago, and changed the world. He gave them fire again, in the form of challenge and transformation, and changed the world once more. What fires might he bring next? What transformations might yet come? Remain to be seen. But for now, for this moment, it is enough to acknowledge what he has done, understand why he did it, and recognize that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in flames that burn away everything we thought we knew, leaving only the essential truths that can survive the fire. So rest well, Prometheus. Your burden is laid down, at least for now. Your chains are broken, your torment ended. The scars remain, yes, but scars are simply evidence of survival, proof that you endured what should have destroyed you and emerged still capable of working towards something better. The fire you brought burns still, and in its light, we can see paths forward that were invisible before. Whether we walk those paths wisely or stumble in the dark is up to us. But at least now, thanks to you, we can see. Thank you for joining me on this deep exploration of Prometheus in Hades 2. I hope this journey through his story, from the chains and the eagle through to the complex moral landscape of the Second Titan War, has given you new appreciation for one of gaming's most nuanced and thoughtfully crafted characters. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into gaming lore and mythology. Hit that like button if this helped you understand Prometheus better, or sparked thoughts about how stories can challenge our assumptions about heroes and villains. And drop a comment sharing your own interpretations of Prometheus's actions. I'd love to hear how you see his character and motivations. Until next time, sleep well, dream deep, and remember, sometimes the greatest acts of heroism look like betrayal from the wrong angle. The fire that burns away what we thought we knew can illuminate truths we desperately need to see. Good night.